I want you to imagine, just for a second, like a classic sliding doors moment.
Oh, those are always the best kinds of stories.
Right. Because it's one of those tiny, um, seemingly inconsequential choices that just completely rewires the rest of your life.
Yeah, the butterfly effect.
Exactly. So put yourself in this scenario. You are standing in a stadium parking lot. It's the end of a Jackson Waters concert.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, the music is like still ringing in your ears. The humidity is totally oppressive. And you are standing on the rough asphalt, completely barefoot.
Barefoot in a parking lot is never a good time.
No, it's the worst. But your friend's boots got ruined in this whole bathroom mishap. So you gave her your shoes, and now you desperately need a ride home.
It's an incredibly vulnerable, highly specific scenario. You're physically uncomfortable, you're tired, and you are relying entirely on the kindness of others to get you out of a bad spot.
Exactly. And standing right in front of you are two guys offering you a lift. They're best friends. The one you choose to ride with in this split second, it dictates the entire next year of your life. But here's the terrifying part that we're exploring today. What happens when you pick the wrong one, and the right one ends up quietly pulling the strings in the background?
Wow. Well, welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Yes, welcome.
Our mission today is a purely storytelling-focused exploration of Abby Jimenez's profoundly complex novel, The Night We Met.
Such a good book.
It really is. We're going to examine the intersecting lives of Larissa, Mike, and Chris. And we're really focusing on how this seemingly straightforward love triangle actually serves as a Trojan horse.
Oh, 100%.
It's hiding so much.
Right. It's a much darker exploration of trauma, the agonizing weight of loyalty, and honestly, the hidden dangers of enabling the people we love.
Yeah, this is a story where that whole concept of right person, wrong time is pushed to its absolute limit.
Push past the limits, really.
Seriously. So we begin with our core trio. Larissa is the woman in the parking lot. She ends up getting into the truck with Mike.
Yeah, because Mike is this highly charismatic, outgoing guy who just immediately sweeps her into his orbit. And standing next to Mike is Chris,
The best friend.
right? His quiet, observant, and like noticeably grumpy best friend.
But to truly grasp the architecture of this whole dynamic, we really have to jump forward a bit to the inciting incident of the novel's present timeline.
Yeah, the hospital trip.
Exactly. It's 5:15 in the morning. Mike is scheduled to drive Larissa and her mother, Nancy, to the hospital for Nancy's major surgery.
Which is a huge deal. It's a critical moment of support.
It is. But instead of showing up, Mike calls Chris, just begging for a massive favor. Mike is completely bailing.
Ugh, the worst.
He tells Chris he has the hangover of the century and demands that Chris step in to drive them. And Mike's specific instruction to Chris here is super telling.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes.
Remind me what he says.
He says, don't tell her I'm hungover, tell her I have a migraine.
Yes. I want to pause on that specific lie right there because it is so manipulative.
It really is.
A hangover implies fault. Right. It's irresponsible.
Yeah.
But a migraine elicits sympathy.
Exactly.
Mike isn't just asking Chris to cover for him. He is asking Chris to actively manipulate Larissa's emotional response.
That's spot on. And Chris, despite being completely exhausted and wading through his own profound grief, actually does it.
He really just goes along with it.
He does. He drives clear across town to Larissa's apartment, which is in a notoriously rough neighborhood. And he meets Larissa, who is, she's already buckling under the weight of her reality.
Yeah, because she isn't just dealing with her mother's surgery. She has just uncovered that her estranged addict father used her social security number to secretly rack up $22,000 in credit card debt.
She is essentially drowning in a situation entirely outside of her control.
22 grand. I can't even imagine.
Right. She's working multiple jobs, taking on extra babysitting gigs just to scrape together $20. Her car is broken down. Her credit is ruined.
And in the exact moment she needs a foundational pillar of support, the man she is dating fabricates a medical issue to sleep off a bender.
It's brutal. So Chris drives them to the hospital. And this is where the tectonic plates of the story really start to shift.
Yeah, the bakery scene.
Yes. Chris doesn't just drop Larissa off at the curb like some Uber driver. He parks.
He actually goes in.
He comes into the waiting room, finds her sitting completely alone and terrified, and refuses to leave. He literally tells her, I took a job, I'm gonna do it, and you can't fire me.
I love that line so much.
It's great. He then takes her across the street to a bakery to basically force her to eat something.
Which functions as this brilliant meet-cute redo. Larissa is way too anxious to eat a normal breakfast, so Chris brilliantly pivots.
He turns it into a game.
Exactly, a low-stakes game. They order 5 different giant loaves of bread, and Chris creates a makeshift scorecard on a paper napkin to rate them.
And they end up giving a pumpernickel bread a perfect 10.
Which is so funny because the waitress literally described that same pumpernickel as tasting like ass.
It adds this wonderful layer of shared, absurd humor to an otherwise totally crushing morning.
It really does. But looking closer at this bakery scene, Chris does something before they even order that reveals his true character.
The allergy check.
Yeah. He insists on meticulously checking the menu for nuts because Larissa has a severe nut allergy.
And he takes it a step further than just checking a menu. He asks to physically hold her EpiPen.
Which is wild for a guy you barely know.
Right, but as a licensed pharmacist, Chris checks the expiration date and the actual color of the epinephrine liquid inside the auto-injector.
Because he knows his stuff.
Exactly. He explains the pharmacology behind it, that Minnesota's extreme temperature fluctuations, leaving a purse in a freezing car or a hot trunk, can actually degrade the medication and render it useless when she needs it most.
This establishes Chris immediately as the ultimate protector. He is so hypervigilant. And it contrasts so sharply with Larissa's first impression of him back in the parking lot.
It really does.
If you view that opening scene like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, Larissa chose Mike because Chris looked hostile and grumpy.
But the irony is that Chris wasn't grumpy. He was in the depths of mourning. His mother had just passed away.
Right. And months later, sitting in this diner, Larissa is slowly realizing the grumpy guy is actually the one anchoring her to reality.
It introduces the central theme perfectly, right? First impressions masking a much more complicated reality.
Totally.
Following this hospital ordeal, Larissa officially enters into a relationship with Mike. But Chris has firmly planted himself in her life as a constant, steady presence.
Yeah, from the sidelines, Chris is just falling helplessly into a deep, agonizing love with her.
Which forces us to look at the stark contrast between these two men.
Oh, it's night and day.
Completely. Mike is a personal trainer with a big lifted truck. He comes from serious money. His stepdad is a local celebrity known as the Toilet King, with plumbing billboards plastered all over the city.
The Toilet King. I love that detail.
On the surface, Mike is the life of the party. But beneath that veneer, Mike struggles with severe blackout alcoholism.
Like dangerous, destructive behavior.
Yeah.
Passing out in his own vomit, destroying property, picking fights he doesn't even remember the next day.
Exactly. And while Mike is constantly dropping the ball and creating chaos, Chris steps into the role of the silent guardian.
The invisible acts of service.
Yes. He begins performing these completely invisible acts of service. Larissa will wake up after a massive Minnesota blizzard to find her car completely cleared of a foot of snow at 3 in the morning.
And she naturally assumes it's her boyfriend, Mike.
But it is always Chris.
It's always Chris. He even accompanies her on these bizarre late-night secret shopper missions.
Oh, the billboard photos.
Yeah, Larissa gets paid $15 a pop to drive around in the middle of the night and photograph the Toilet King billboards to ensure the floodlights are working.
And Chris rides shotgun.
He does. He also discreetly intercepts and throws away peanut butter Cliff bars at social gatherings, so Larissa is never exposed to her allergen.
He's always watching out for her.
He is, but I have to push back on this dynamic a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because we celebrate the supportive best friend trope, right? But we really need to look at the reality of Chris's actions here. At what point does covering for Mike stop being about the bro code and start being active deception?
That is a very fair point.
Because Chris is lying to Larissa by omission. He is constructing a false reality where Mike is a dependable partner, essentially tricking her into staying in a toxic relationship.
That is the crucial moral dilemma the book forces us to confront. Chris is absolutely enabling Mike, and he is undeniably lying to Larissa.
Yeah.
But the author provides the psychological architecture behind his choices, and it is devastating.
Oh, his mom.
Yes. Chris's mother, the one who died just 3 months before that concert, passed away from cirrhosis of the liver caused by severe alcoholism.
Which changes the entire context of his behavior.
It completely reframes it. It is a deeply guarded secret. He hasn't even told Mike the true cause of her death.
Wow, not even his best friend.
No, he only confesses it to Larissa during one of those late-night car rides. Chris explains that his mother's drinking didn't even seem that extreme to him growing up, which leaves him with this immense, crushing survivor's guilt.
He feels like he failed her.
He feels he failed to see the signs and failed to save her. And consequently, he has projected all of that trauma directly onto Mike.
So he's developed this pathological savior complex.
Exactly. Chris believes that if he abandons Mike, Mike will die just like his mother did. And simultaneously, he believes if Mike loses Larissa, the heartbreak will cause Mike to spiral into an early grave.
So Chris is essentially trapping himself in a prison of his own loyalty. He is trying to hold up the sky for both of them, absorbing all the collateral damage at the expense of his own soul and ethics.
Perfectly said.
He's built a cage to keep Mike safe, but he's locked Larissa in there with him.
Yes, and because Chris is so successful at hiding the extent of Mike's addiction, it creates a dangerous pressure cooker.
Larissa thinks things are relatively normal.
Right, which leads her to agree to a group cabin trip for Christmas.
Oh boy, the cabin trip.
She walks into a minefield completely blind. And to further complicate the trip, Chris is terrified his true feelings for Larissa will become obvious in such tight quarters.
So he brings a decoy.
He does. He brings a decoy girlfriend, a doctor named Heather, to basically mask his affection.
The psychological toll this takes on Larissa is just fascinating. She experiences physical nausea on the car ride up just watching Chris with another woman.
She is slowly waking up to her own misplaced affection.
Yeah, but the physical isolation of the cabin, being snowed in, nowhere to hide, it strips away all the illusions Chris has built.
The truth about Mike finally surfaces.
It's bad.
It is. He gets belligerently, embarrassingly drunk. He loses control of his bodily functions, sleeping on a ruined floor, and Larissa finally hits her absolute breaking point.
She confronts him and officially ends the relationship.
And Mike's reaction is just sheer desperation. He begs for another chance, making empty promises to change his behavior.
But Larissa delivers this phenomenal response. She tells him, good, then change for somebody else.
Such a powerful line. She walks away. But later that afternoon, the simmering tension erupts into something genuinely lethal.
Yeah, the author executes an incredible genre shift right here. Jimenez takes the classic cozy romance trope of a snowy winter cabin getaway and violently twists it into a thriller sequence.
A literal thriller.
A simple kiss is weaponized by negligence.
The mechanics of this scene are terrifying. Mike, who is still heavily intoxicated and spiraling from the breakup, corners Larissa in the cramped kitchen.
He's just totally out of control.
He is crying, pleading, and completely refusing to accept her boundaries. He physically overpowers her, pins her against the kitchen counter, and forces a rough, unconsented kiss on her.
Which is a massive violation of her bodily autonomy on its own.
Yes, but it immediately escalates into a literal life-or-death emergency, because Mike, in his drunken stupor, had just been in his bedroom eating macadamia nut macarons.
The exact cookies Chris had been frantically trying to keep hidden all weekend.
Exactly. Larissa shoves him off, and you can feel the panic jumping off the page. Her voice is shaking. She asks him if he ate nuts.
Within seconds, her lips are tingling. Her throat starts to close. The terrifying reality of anaphylactic shock is that it doesn't give you time to process.
No, the body immediately goes to war with itself.
And this is the moment the dam finally breaks for Chris.
Yes. Years of suppressed tension, the unresolved grief of his mother, the hypervigilance of keeping Larissa safe, the exhaustion of managing Mike's addiction.
It all just snaps.
It all snaps. Chris physically attacks his best friend. He pummels Mike with such ferocity that the other men in the cabin have to physically drag him off.
Just wailing on him.
While this brawl is happening, Heather, the decoy girlfriend who is mercifully a medical professional, teams up with the rest of the friend group in a frantic scramble to locate Larissa's EpiPen and administer Benadryl.
It is pure, unfiltered chaos.
It really is. It's the ultimate forest fire. Everything they knew about their friend group burns to the ground in that kitchen.
And following the disaster, Larissa obviously refuses to get in a car with Mike ever again.
Clear.
Chris and Heather drive her back to the city. But Chris intervenes once more. He knows Larissa's tiny, isolated apartment isn't a safe place to recover from a massive medical trauma.
No, she needs monitoring.
So he insists she move her belongings into his spare bedroom so he can watch her recovery.
Which creates a fascinating new dynamic. They are suddenly sharing a domestic space.
Just the two of them?
Well, and the dog. They also share custody of a dog named Wolverine.
Best dog name ever, by the way.
A delightfully chaotic little animal who famously killed a garter snake on a disastrous hiking trip and covered Larissa in the remains.
Classic Wolverine.
But Wolverine serves as this grounding, comforting presence in the house amidst all the emotional wreckage.
Yeah, and in the weeks that follow, Chris's brand of support actually evolves. Larissa decides to start a Gray's Table charcuterie business.
Which is so perfect for her.
It is. But instead of just handing her cash to start it, which he knows her pride would never accept after her father's financial betrayal, Chris co-signs a business loan for her.
He restores the agency that both her father and Mike had stripped away from her.
He empowers her to build her own safety net.
But the physical proximity in the house creates completely unbearable romantic tension.
Obviously. They are cooking meals together, reading in the same room, sharing quiet routines. Chris is gently covering her with blankets when she falls asleep on the sofa.
And through these quiet moments, the veil is entirely lifted. Larissa finally connects the dots.
Everything clicks into place.
The shoveling of the snow, the late-night drives, the perfectly timed interventions with the EpiPen. It was never Mike. It was always Chris.
The realization hits her like a freight train. She recognizes that the lukewarm, anxious feeling she had with Mike, that wasn't love. What she feels for Chris is deep, undeniable, and terrifyingly real.
So she confronts him, she confesses her feelings, and Chris, in just a heartbreaking turn, hesitates.
Ugh, the hesitation.
His reaction is rooted entirely in fear. He tells her they cannot cross that line. If they become a couple, it will irrevocably destroy his 25-year friendship with Mike, and it will likely fracture their entire social circle.
He is still functioning inside that prison of loyalty? He believes he has to sacrifice his own happiness to avoid being the villain in someone else's story.
Exactly. But Larissa has survived way too much to let him hide behind his guilt anymore.
She packs her bags to move out, and she delivers the most devastating line of the entire narrative.
Oh, I know the one.
She looks at him and says, "Maybe this isn't the kind of love that deserves to exist. Maybe it's the kind that wars start over, the kind that topples empires and never leaves the world better than it found it."
Chills. That is the exact phrase that shatters Chris's resolve. He looks at her, processes the profound truth in her words, and replies, "Then let it all burn."
Yes.
He finally kisses her. He actively chooses Larissa, accepting that the comfort of his old life must be sacrificed for them to have a future.
Which brings us to the core message of the story. They choose each other, and the immediate fallout is exactly as massive as Chris feared.
They are completely isolated.
Yeah. But this is where the narrative provides a deeply earned, unexpected resolution. The forest fire metaphor we discussed earlier comes full circle.
Right.
Yes, the fire burns down the existing landscape, the old friend group dynamics, the toxic codependency, the enabling. But a forest fire is often a necessary ecological event.
It clears the deadwood.
Exactly, so that new, healthier roots can access the sunlight and actually grow.
The truth is initially destructive, but it ultimately forces everyone into a position where they must heal. Months later, Chris and Mike finally sit down for a confrontation.
And the dynamic has shifted entirely.
Completely. Mike is sober, he is holding down a full-time job, and instead of anger, Mike offers absolution.
Wow.
He tells Chris that he always knew deep down that Chris was the better man for Larissa. Mike admits his own self-hatred for not stepping up when he had the opportunity.
And then Mike says something incredibly profound that redefines their entire history. He tells Chris, "She's not the great love of my life. You are."
It's just beautiful.
He is speaking about their platonic bond, the profound brotherhood they shared. Mike gives them his blessing. This proves that Chris's decision to finally stop enabling Mike was the exact catalyst Mike needed.
By letting Mike fall, Chris forced Mike to figure out how to stand back up on his own.
It is a remarkable redemption arc for Mike. It avoids that cliche of turning the ex-boyfriend into a one-dimensional villain.
Right. And more importantly, it finally absolves Chris of the suffocating guilt he has carried since his mother's death. He learns he cannot save people from themselves. He can only love them truthfully.
The psychological depth of these characters is stunning, and there is fascinating behind-the-scenes context from the author, Abby Jimenez.
Oh, from her author's note.
Yeah. In her author's note, she reveals that the premise of this book lived in her head for nearly a decade. She actually made the difficult decision to delay the publication of this specific novel.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, she chose to write and publish a completely different book first. It focused on Xavier, another character in their friend group, and she did it specifically to buy herself an extra year to work on Chris and Larissa's story.
Because she understood that juggling the nuances of a taboo romance, falling in love with your best friend's partner, required an incredibly delicate touch.
Absolutely. If handled poorly, the characters just become unlikable.
She needed that extra time to meticulously build the psychological framework of trauma, enabling, and grief. So the reader understands exactly why these characters make such difficult choices.
The effort absolutely shows on the page. The pacing, the exploration of addiction, the slow burn of the romance, it functions as a masterclass in emotional storytelling.
It truly does. And as we wrap up our analysis, there is a quiet moment in the book that perfectly encapsulates the entire journey.
Okay, lay it on me.
During one of their conversations, Chris and Larissa are discussing the concept of chemistry. They are trying to articulate why we are inexplicably drawn to certain people, even when the timing is wrong or the circumstances are chaotic.
And Chris, leaning on his scientific background, points out a fundamental truth about actual chemistry. You cannot always explain the exact why behind a reaction.
You can't always articulate why protons attract electrons with such force, you just know that they do.
Right. Our understanding of chemistry is based on observable evidence, not always absolute philosophical proof. There are rules and structures, but ultimately the attraction just is. You can't perfectly explain the magic of it.
Which is such a gorgeous thought. And we want to turn that concept over to you, the listener. Think about the architecture of your own life. Think back to your own sliding door moments.
Yeah, the times you were standing metaphorically barefoot in a parking lot, faced with a choice that would alter your trajectory.
Is there a truth you're ignoring right now simply because you cannot perfectly explain the chemistry behind it?
Are you fighting an undeniable force in your own life? Maybe a career shift, a relationship, a hard conversation. Just because you are terrified of the collateral damage.
Maybe. Sometimes the only way to find the right path is to have the courage to let the old one burn.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.